Coronavirus sucks. It really does. And regardless of how you feel about stay-at-home and physical distancing orders, it's really not fun. And by the way, thanks to Matthias for recommending that term over social distancing, as it's certainly more apt at explaining where most of us are right now. And yes, I'm aware that Elon Musk has rallied against physical distancing and likened stay-at-home orders to fascism. But I have one family member and numerous friends affected by this horrible pandemic. And I happen to live in a state where per capita infections and deaths are low because our governor acted decisively and early. So you can probably guess where I personally fall when it comes to reopening versus continued caution. But let's not really focus on that issue because, well, we're here to talk about something else. As coronavirus has bitten hard, we've seen some automakers push back plans for electric vehicle launches. We've seen some cancel plans entirely. And we've seen many analysts suggest that this is the death knell for electric vehicles, especially thanks to the unexpected glut in oil, pushing the price of crude oil so low that future traders are now paying people to take it off their hands. Yet it's now becoming clear that oil's future is in jeopardy as it hits negative prices on the futures market and prices at the pump drop to figures not seen in decades. Europe could be about to get rid of oil subsidies completely. As Tesla's quarterly earnings report this week has shown, electric vehicles are far from dead. Yes, Tesla is feeling the pinch like every other company out there, large and small. But people are still switching to cleaner, greener forms of transport. And data from multiple sources now seems to suggest that car buyers are more than ever before considering an electric vehicle as their next car of choice because of the improvement in air quality and lower pollution that was demonstrated because of coronavirus and people travelling less. Of course, there's nothing I've said at this point that suggests that oil is about to die because of coronavirus. When countries reopen prematurely or at a more appropriate time, oil consumption will resume and people will be back to their usual habits, good intentions or not. Except they might not be. You see, today, the fossil fuel industry around the world exists because it's heavily subsidised by governments eager to benefit from all of the jobs and all of the financial positives that come from exploiting natural resources. But there's talk that those subsidies, specifically those in Europe, might be about to go away. This would force oil and gas and coal to go up in price, and that would make them not only environmentally irresponsible to use, but also economically irresponsible too. According to the International Monetary Fund, a total of $5.2 trillion went to fossil fuel subsidies around the world in 2017, and not a lot has changed since. If you're trying to figure out how much $5.2 trillion is, well, in 2017 it accounted for 6.4% of the global gross domestic product. And it's maybe 2.5 times the amount of money that the US government has spent so far on COVID-19 stimulus packages. If you were wondering, as a side, the US is estimated to spend around $649 billion on fossil fuel subsidies every year. Russia is estimated to spend around $551 billion, and China a monster $1.4 trillion. Again, that's data from the IMF. But the European Union, which has a goal of being climate neutral by 2050, is seriously starting to examine the $217 billion equivalent that its member states send to the oil, coal and gas industries per year. That money, which could be spent on far cleaner sources of energy, is, as experts in the EU state, hindering rather than helping the member states to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. EU Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson told Bloomberg this week that, quote, "Now is a good time to reflect how our regulatory framework, including tax systems, can better support a more sustainable and resilient future. Getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies while lowering taxes on electricity can nudge us in the right direction without putting too much pressure on consumers." Essentially, by decreasing subsidies for fossil fuels and then using the money saved to lower taxes on electricity, it's possible to push more generators towards renewable energy and energy storage products. How is that going to look? Well, let's examine one of the worst countries in Europe when it comes to fossil fuel subsidies, my home country of the UK. Last year, it gave stupidly large amounts of money to fossil fuel industries in terms of subsidies. And yet, As I'm about to show you, even the UK's electricity grid is so much cleaner and greener than it once was. I'm going to prove the point by looking at the UK National Grid status as of 11:30 p.m. on Thursday, April 30th, 2020, which is when I wrote the script for today's show. Because it's nearly midnight in the UK, it is not the greenest part of the day because there's no photovoltaic generation, even though consumption of energy isn't that high because people are asleep. But even at night, the grid is being fed by 26.2% renewable energy, 27% fossil fuels, 14.4% interconnects to other countries in Europe, and 32.4% of other forms of electricity generation, which includes controversial things like nuclear and the not-so-cool biomass. In the last 24 hours, the UK has relied on renewable energy far more than it has on fossil fuels, 31% versus 25%. If fossil fuel subsidies weren't in place, and yes, I know the UK, Europe, it's complicated, then we'd see far more renewable energy investment in the UK and in other nations around the world. At the moment, the EU's decision to end fossil fuel subsidies is certainly not a foregone conclusion. It's being investigated and examined as a potential way forward. So let's not pretend that lobbyists from the fossil fuel industry will just give up and not do everything they can to keep pennies rolling in for fossil fuels, because they will. But with Europe on a path to lower emissions and many nations within Europe setting themselves a tough goal for carbon footprints, well, oil could soon be persona non grata in Europe at least. How will this affect other nations around the world? Well, it is hard to tell. But if oil isn't being subsidised in Europe and other nations follow suit, which they may well do, we could soon see oil become a whole lot more expensive to mine and produce and sell, which would make them less competitive than other forms of energy. And it would certainly even the energy playing field. And then something fun happens, because if you remove fossil fuel subsidies, then things like electric vehicle subsidies and incentives aren't needed as much, because suddenly gasoline vehicles become a whole lot more expensive to own. Suddenly coal-fired power stations become a whole lot more expensive. The same is true for gas-fired power stations. And that could be a very good thing all round. That's it. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to help us make more videos like this, please do like, comment and subscribe. Send a couple of dollars our way every month through Patreon, or feed our coffee habit with Ko-fi. Thanks to the folks scrolling by on my right. They are our charged up patrons. You can join them by donating $15 a month, and you will join them on the scrolling wall. If you've just started donating at the charged up level, you may not see your name here, but don't worry, it should soon pop up when we've refreshed the list. Special thanks to John Lyons and Regine Fellows for being our $50 a month self-driving patrons. They will get a complimentary tour of our studio if they ever happen to be in Portland for their trouble. And of course, super ooper special thanks to the Starman level patrons. That's Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback and Sean Udea for being the top level Starman patrons, going round the solar system in a Tesla Roadster. Join them at $100 a month and you will get a personalised tour of Portland, complete with food, after, what did we call it, physical distancing ends. If you're looking for something else to watch from the channel, Google thinks you might enjoy this one, so check it out. If you haven't, I'll be back soon with more content for you all to enjoy. But until then, wash your hands, stay safe and keep evolving.